Okay guys, so Dan Weston asked, when you're doing a hip hop or pop song, do you use any compression on the drums to keep peaks in check? And if so, is it on the individual sounds or drum sub? What compressors do you find suitable for this use? Great. So a hip hop track, I've talked about glue and on tracks, and on a hip hop track, the approach is unglue. Like, you want separation from your sounds. And I tend to almost never do a drum bus compressor or any processing to the stereo drum, including drum, bass, hi-hat, and kick, snare, hi-hat, and all that stuff. So what I do is I never ever glue those, meaning I process them individually. So if there's a kick and I want that hard hit and the sound doesn't give me that, I'll just maybe go to my 1073 or with an Avalon 2044, or sometimes I'll do a Quad 8. And then I'll also use some of the plugins out there. But for the most part, I don't want glue when it comes to hip hop. And that's what I would do to hip hop drums. Roman English says, hey Manny, thanks for doing this. Can you explain your process working with stems in the box after you're almost done with mixing a song? What's your train of thought when it's up to the parallel compression? By the way, your plugins are the best. Thank you, Roman. So what do? After I have, I'm still on the desk on my SSL. So I'll mix the song on the desk, then we print stems. Now at that point, I'm in the box. But the stems, it's really hard to, especially if I'm over compressing a song, so that the stems sound the way they should sound on the way back. So there's a couple of tricks. What I do a couple of things. We bypass whatever's on my master bus, and then I put it back in with the stems. That works fairly well. On my SSL, I got a key input, so we feed that into it so that it has the compression, even though we're soloing each instrument at a time. It has the same overall bus compression. And then once I'm in the box, I'm in the box. I process the way anybody would in the box. If the client says vocal up, I bring the vocal up in the box. If the client says, it's an alternative type of track, if I want my drums to be glued and I want this cool stereo bus compression on the drums, and I do what you would do in the box. We'll select the Knox, send the drums to that, and play around with compressors. I feel like the parallel compression right now is just this fancy thing to do, and I think it's so funny. People, young engineers, spend a lot of time thinking about that, and I don't pay too much attention to parallel compression, but I do parallel compression as well. But it's just a fancy thing to do nowadays. It's like the trend. But that's how I get my stems to sound as good as the mix sounds on the desk. And it's been years and years of trial and error to get the system going, and I'm still trying to make it better and better. So that's what I do. Okay, Paul van de Gagen. Sorry, I butchered your name. I'm so sorry. Hi, Manny. Could you tell us something about your mixing process? For example, I heard you always start with the drums. At what point do you move on to new elements? What about adding reverb and delay, etc.? Once you feel the mix is coming together, do you repeat your process of balancing, processing again until the mix is done? Or is your approach more linear? Whoa, that's a great question, because I just spent a week here at La Fabrique discussing that. I did a couple exercises. I had the guys do sort of my process without them knowing what my process is. And it's very simple. I start with the drums, always. I always joke around. Even if there's no drums in the song, I start with drums. Meaning that I'm very groove oriented. So I want to establish the groove. I don't move past the groove until I think I have the groove, not 100%, but until I feel good about it. And then I start bringing other things like the bass. Now I got the bass. Is my bass feeling good with the drums? And once I establish that, I move on to the maybe I'll put the vocal in to see what the vocal's doing. I'll mute the vocal, bring it down. I'll keep going with the synths. What type of track is it? Is it a hip hop track? Is it a indie, alternative, country, folk? Whatever the genre is will sort of mix itself. So then once we have all the drums, my rhythm section, my groove is established, I start bringing more colors into it. It could be guitar, synths, and again, I'll bring the vocal up to check and make sure how the vocal is affecting other things. If it's a big pop song, I want to make sure that the vocal is established. I may actually work rhythm section and then do some stuff on the vocal. Now, to start off with, I'll put maybe just a simple reverb delay so that it inspires me to keep working on the groove when the vocal's in. Once the vocal's in and I have basic delay and EQ, throughout the day I'm tweaking and I'm working on the effects. But my attention is, does it even need effects? Does it even need a delay? Does it need a reverb? Who knows? It may not need any of that. So after I get my groove, some of the instruments, some of the focal points in, I may just want to mute the delay, or I may want to change the delay, or I may want to EQ, process, whatever it is. And if you haven't had a chance to check out my delay with Waves, it's very useful and it's really, really simple to use. So I can get any tone, fast, efficient, and I like to think that it sounds musical too. So I'll start with basic things, but I don't let the delays or the effects drive what the mix should be doing. I was telling the guys this week that I use as needed. If it needs it, I use it. If not, then I don't even mess with it. But I establish the groove first, and then I move on to other things. Doesn't mean that my groove is done. It just means that I can move on. And then once I bring other things in, I may go back to the groove and compensate for that space that the other things have taken. Ricardo Mosca asks, hey Manny, thank you for doing this. On Pensado's Place interview, you said you don't do recalls. Instead, you print stems back to Pro Tools. And then if you need to recall the song, you found a way to make your in-the-box stems sound close enough to your SSL mix. So what's the secret? I discussed that there's no such thing as secrets here. But what I do is I take whatever I'm doing on the stereo bus, I bypass it, we print stems, and then do a new session, import that aux, and put whatever I was doing on the stereo bus back in. And simple as that. On my SSL, we do a key chain, a key input, we feed the mix into it. When we solo, the kick or whatever I'm printing has the same compression that the SSL has. And it comes back pretty close. It doesn't come back 100%. I may have to compensate here and there, maybe a kick level, maybe a vocal level, maybe half a dB, 0.3 dB on something, but I'll A/B it and make sure that I'm as close to my SSL mix as possible. And then at that point, I'm in the box and I do what anybody else would in the box. Emiliano Caballero asks, Manny, I love the Bruno Mars record. In Locked Out of Heaven, I can feel different dynamic changes during the song. How did you approach the mixing to translate that sense of emotional change? Do you get influenced by your clients' rough mixes? Which was your first thought that came to your mind when you started mixing that song? Thanks. So, Emiliano, Bruno came and played me his rough mix. And I feel like the rough mix kind of gave me enough information to sort of mix the song. So I've said I said a couple of times that song I tried things that I had never tried before because I knew it was special. I felt good about it. The rough just, gave me the sense of what the song was about and how special that song is. So I did a couple things where the dynamic changes were there, but I just exaggerated them. I popped compressors in different sections that I would have normally never done before. But again, I felt like it needed that. It was there, but I just felt like I needed to make it better or make it more pronounced and exaggerate some of the emotions. So simply, it was one of those where I need a lift here. How can I create a lift? I don't want to bring my volume up. I don't want to do rides because the focal point disappears. So it was let me try to glue this section. And I think that song has maybe 4 different sections. Of course, you got the Police vibe, and I didn't listen to it. I didn't reference any of the Police records, but I felt like, oh, what do I remember from a Police record? And my perception of that is how I approached it. And then after that, it was just about getting those dynamics. That song was all dynamics, because it's really difficult to create when you listen back, it's hard to tie those sections in. And the only way I felt like I was able to do it was just creating dynamics, whether it was with my compressor or whether it's filtering or EQing a section, an instrument, because it sounded that frequency range was missing on the previous section, and now I got to carve it out in the next section, or else it'll feel like cutting and pasting, even though it wasn't a cut and paste. But it was a tricky song. It was, but I think that what helped was just obviously having a great production. You know, I can't take all the credit for it. It was a great production, and I just kind of exaggerated what was there already. And that was it. That's the first thing that came to mind on how to exaggerate those dynamics and make it go like this, so that the listener's always engaged and there's always a push-pull feeling with that song. And that was it. That was the approach on that. Okay, so Patrick Brown. Hey Manny, how do you like your coffee? Well, thanks for the wonderful question, because if you're trying to break into the business, make sure you know how to make a really, really good cup of tea or a cup of coffee or a Jack and Coke, whatever it is. Make sure that the client's always happy, and it's a good advice for anybody that's trying to break into the business. We got to pay attention to detail, and if you cannot make coffee, then this is not probably your career. But yeah, so thanks for that. That was a fun question. Okay, so I'm gonna screw this name up. I apologize, and it's from the link went. Hey Manny, can you tell me how to EQ a harsh or bright vocal to make it sound more natural? And are there any particular EQ and compressor that I can use to tame the harshness? And what frequencies should I be targeting? So there is a plugin called the Manny Marroquin Signature Series, Triple D, that takes that is de-esser, de-harsher, and de-boxer. I find that vocals nowadays, because of tools, can be a little harsh sounding. The inexperienced young engineers don't know how to properly use microphones and compressors and preamps. So we sometimes get harsh sounding vocals. And also depends what information is there around the vocal that makes it sound harsh as well. So listen, that's why I created this plugin, because I face that a lot. So it's as simple as the plugin has a key listen. You hit the key listen, you listen to the frequency you want to get rid of, you declick the key listen, and you bring that one knob up, and it does it for you. And it's all to taste. Sometimes you will abuse it, and then you'll start scaling back. The harsher, you got to be really careful with it. And then I have a de-esser, same concept. Key listen to what you're trying to get rid of, unclick key listen, bring the knob up, and boom, voila, you have a smooth vocal. So you should try that. As far as hardware, my go-to is a CL1B Tube Tech. I use that a lot in the 1176. Have the luxury to have a Fairchild in my room that when I have these harsh vocals. But my point is, you don't need, listen, if you have it, great, but you can also achieve this this sound in the box by using a couple of the plugins, especially one of those, the de-harsher. That, believe me, it's going to change your life. I hope it changes your life. All right, moving right along. Jamie Turnbull asks, hey Manny, can you tell me how you like to use distortion in your mixes? I use your plugin and have been a fan of using lo-fi a lot in my mixes to brighten things up. Cool. Thank you for using my plugin. Distortion. I use distortion almost like EQing something. Sometimes I add a little crunch on stuff that you can't really tell in the mix, but you know something's going on. So with distortion, I like to use very subtle distortion. Now, of course, if you have a guitar and you want to distort it, that's an effect. But I use distortion to color things, and that's why I came up with that plugin as well. I felt like there's not a lot of good distortion boxes, plugins out there. There are a few, don't get me wrong, but a lot of them, I just felt the distortion wasn't as musical, and I tried my very, very best to create something that was at least musical and that you can manipulate with the frequencies in the box, and you can get a sound really fast. So I use it to just shape things more as an EQ than, say, a distortion box. Damon Martin asks, what are your top 2 to 3 favorite albums of all time that you feel were sonically perfect? Also, in what ways are you pushing boundaries to top those albums, and or what new horizons have you hit lately that you feel may have taken your mixes further? Well, how I feel my mixes hopefully move forward is just by, like I told the guys here at La Fabrique, being just a music fan, meaning I listen to new things, I get inspired by new sounds, and I hear something that I would never, not never, but I wouldn't have listened to if I was closed-minded. So my ears stay open, and if it's something that I wouldn't necessarily listen to, I give it a shot. And who knows, maybe there's a guitar tone in there that I try to use on one of my mixes and try to create that and be inspired by that sound. And it's just simple inspiration from either my peers or just people that I look up to, artists, and just being a music fan. 2, 3 favorite albums of all time? Oh man, that's such a tough question, because it's like, which kid do you like the best? You know, well, you have 3 kids. Pick one? It's hard for me to pick. I do like what I have worked on. I don't know if that's the question, if you've asked if they were my favorite albums that I have worked on or just favorite albums that have inspired me. Well, the ones that I've worked on, just because I'm selfish and I'm going to talk about me, I have to say Continuum. Continuum was great, John Mayer. I really, really like the way that album feels and sounds. This artist named Citizen Cope, the Clarence Greenwood recording, it makes a few things on that as well. It just feels right. It just gives me a sense of like, yes, I can do this. There's some Alicia stuff, As I Am, that I feel like sounded really good and influenced me to, keep mixing some of that stuff. There's a new album that's about to come out by The Weeknd that I feel like we nailed the atmosphere and the feel of what that was. So, God, I can just keep going and going. But I would say if I had to name 2 or 3 or 4, those would be the ones that come to mind right now. And of course, as soon as the camera stops rolling, I'll think of 10 more that I'm going to say I should have said this one or that one. But those are the ones that come to mind. So I hope that helps. Okay, so Steve Allen, what type of strategy or way of approaching a rap beat that has tons of 808s in the mix and it overpowers the vocal from the bass being so low and aggressive? It actually makes the vocal crunch. So, again, we discussed this here at La Fabrique in this lovely, lovely 1-week seminar that we do. We discussed 808s. 808s, I feel like in a mix, 808s or the low-end information is the hardest. It's really difficult. And the vocals. So if you have your low-end information, if you can master that, and then also your vocals, those are the 2 hardest things in the mix for the most part. 808s, my approach is very simple. I leave the 808 alone. I don't color it at all. I try to EQ around the 808. So if anything else is getting in the way of the 808, I try to take it out so that 808 always has space. And that's the trick. Simple as that. And you're like, how do you carve frequencies out? Well, you have your 808 and you have a kick and you solo both of them and you start messing with the kick. If the kick gets in the way of the 808, then you EQ that frequency out. It may be a tiny bit. maybe a combination of level and EQ. Anything that you get the 808 to exist on its own, and then the kick becomes plays a supporting role, and everything else plays a supporting role. So if you bring faders up and it gets in the way of the 808, just try EQing some stuff out if level doesn't work. And it's a simple approach, but it's very effective. And that was it.